everyone. Welcome to the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole meeting, March 12th, 2024 at 9 a.m. in Council Chambers. So first off, we will have the agenda. No new entries, no late items, Mrs. Wilson?
No, there's no.
Thank you very much. Could we have the committee of the whole meeting be approved as printed? Thank you. Councillor King, Councillor Bennett, all in favor. Thank you. And the adoption of some minutes, the committee of the whole minutes from February the 27th. Do we have a motion for that, please? Councillor Chong, Councillor Puerto Rico, all in favor. Thank you. And first off, we have a petition, a fire apparatus review, and I will turn this over to Chief Courtmeyer, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, to the rest of council. In 2023, Vesuvius Fire Rescue budgeted a plan for a fire apparatus review. The report is attached to the agenda, and we have Ernie Polson from Firewise Consulting that will be speaking about the report today.
Thank you. Please come up, Mr. Polson, to the podium.
Good morning, Your Worship and Council, Town of Vesuvius Administration. Thank you very much for the opportunity to do a bunch of work in your community, get to know your amazing towns a little bit better, and an opportunity to work with your staff on a very important project.
One second. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Firewise Consulting was commissioned to do a review of your fire apparatus in relation to the risk profile of your community. So it's been a really interesting project. Oh, there we go. So I just wanted to acknowledge that our efforts with the town have been a really interesting exploration that we couldn't have happened without the great support of the great people that work for the town of Vesuvius, from the town manager, the CAO, to fire chief and his staff. Incredibly helpful, extremely professional, and have actively engaged and listened to get to a report that we're quite proud of. I think it's important to know that they're very committed to the community, and the community needs community safety and reflecting the best possible services for the community in a sustainable and appropriate way. They're also extremely committed to the fire department, to their roles and mandates within the organization. The report that you've got in front of you support people and it sets the system supporting them. If you don't have people, there really isn't a particular need for fire protection. So your fire protection system needs to be sustainable, it needs to be reasonable, it needs to be effective, it needs to be efficient, and all of those things in support of the community that you're building. So we're going to talk a little bit about community risk profile. Vesuvius is an interesting community, and it was a lot of fun going through your risk profile. Everybody says their community is unique, and they're true. Vesuvius may be more unique than most. We're going to talk a little bit about the business cases that make up an important part of the report. And we'll close. It's a very short presentation. I would rather that you ask some questions. I'm assuming you've had a chance to see the report itself. So, community risk profile. As anybody that lived through the summer of 2023 in the Okanagan, I'm a West Bank resident. We all saw climate change firsthand, front and center. what's becoming really clear is that climate change is affecting all of us. So our traditional approaches to how we use mutual aid and all of that have to change. They have to change. We can't count on an isolated emergency affecting our community, and we can pull unused resources from others. Climate change is saying that we need to have an integrated approach that recognizes we may need to stand on our own for some period of time before the next community or the next three communities be able to move resources. This becomes a really important consideration for you when we're talking about apparatus replacement strategies, apparatus typing strategies, and all of that sort of stuff. The other thing about climate change is that it's the impact, as we saw in the McDougal Creek fire in West Kelowna, West Bank, all of a sudden it became a Kelowna issue because it left our side of the lake and went to their side of the lake, and it jumped well, more than 3 kilometers, and ended up in the hills behind the lake on the Kelowna side. A truly remarkable thing and stuff that we haven't seen. It affects our risk profile. It again affects how we're going to look at fire protection in our communities, and certainly the apparatus decisions that we make on all settlements. Which that wildland urban interface is a really big deal. And I'm not sure that our mapping is caught up with the actual risk profile. Your development here is interesting. You've got a big city core of buildings, multi-story, busy. I drove down to take a look at the recent fire in town. Those are complex neighborhoods and with increasing density that affects the type of apparatus and the capabilities of your fire department to manage that first response. Construction types, we're seeing a real big change in the types of construction that are going in, multi-family, multi-story buildings being plugged into traditionally residential neighborhoods. So as we see our communities develop, including the size, you're going to see more larger, denser populated communities within communities. That changes the profile of what chief and his firefighters need to be able to manage that. Then your community demographics, that was a really interesting one. Found out that I'm very nearly in the majority when I'm visiting down here. Nearly half of your population is my age or older, 65 or older. That changes dramatically a whole bunch of things in terms of fire protection, not the least of which people that are my age or older tend to, when they need service, need more service. They need different types of service. The ability to escape on our own, to get out on our own, may be reduced, which puts increasing pressure on the fire department and changes the strategy and tactics that the apparatus needs to be able to support and encourage. More automation on the apparatus side frees up people to do rescue and evacuation and all of those good things. So a whole bunch of really solid arguments, and all of which is in the report. Oh, very cool. Okay, so there's 5 business cases. We walked through the entirety of your. Can't back that up, or I could have probably, but I don't know. Oh, where did my business? Okay, so the business cases, there's 5 business cases. And they cover the entirety of your fleet operations. We talk about wildland firefighting equipment. We talk about the need for an aerial apparatus to be available to the fire department for intervention. The fire down the hill here was about 3 degrees away from entering the top of the 2-story building to the east of it. That was a huge argument, and was one of the properties that we actually did look at when we were doing our fire flow calculations and risk profile. But the reality is, when you drive around town, in terms of aerial apparatus utilization, in my experience with large city fire departments that I manage, we use them for everything. You've got clay tile and steel steel roof decks with solar panels becoming more and more common, all of those sorts of things that removes the ability for firefighters on the roof. They need to have the support of that aerial apparatus. So the 5 business cases go through all of that. We also talked in there about an opportunity to better capitalize on your significant investments in fire protection by updating your fire underwriter survey analysis. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. So we do think that there's a need for an aerial apparatus. We see that as a regional resource. It's certainly of value to the town, but there isn't an awful lot of capability anywhere in the valley. Summerland and Penticton are your 2 closest neighbors. That's an awful long way away when you've got a major fire in your downtown core with people in. Enhancing your structural firefighting fleet takes on a couple of things. Number 1 is maintaining your fleet at an appropriate age, so that you maintain the maximum certification value with fire underwriters survey in relation to fire insurance premiums. But it's also, part of it's about age and part of it's about overall company capacity. When we do fire flow calculations, which we did about a dozen properties around the town, what we've recommended is that better alignment between what your fleet capabilities are and what your risk profile is. Okay. One of the things that we looked at, and we are aware that there's some challenges in certain areas of town regarding your water supplies and their capabilities. That's a long-term problem that's going to be resolved. I know you're working your hearts out to develop the strategy. The Superior Tanker Shuttle certification is a formal accredited certification through Fire Underwriter Survey that can deliver quantities of water sufficient to meet much of your fire protection water supplies using tenders and water tanks and drafting. Now, normally we would be talking about that for an unserviced rural area, but it has application in town. It can take some of the pressure as you're developing, as you're implementing your water system upgrades and modernization to do this. And you likely have most of the capacity that you need to deliver that between your town and regional partners. Wildland and marine operations, those are conversations that we think are important to council. Right now that you've got a significant community risk in that beautiful lake that's out front that is heavily used and enjoyed by many, watercraft and whatever else. Right now, the fire department has very little capability to deploy to water-based incidents, despite the fact that there's increasing development of tourist facilities and tourist use and local resident use of those like. So there needs to be a conversation around that, and we've started to frame that. And then upgrade to your underwriter survey grade. It's been a very long time since fire underwriter survey has been updated. Doesn't take into account the really good decisions that councils have made previously on facility upgrades, on water system plans for improvement, in terms of staffing and all of that good stuff. There's value in capitalizing. The town should get credit for the great work that it's doing to this point. So, in closing, community growth needs to consider fire protection. As you're building and as you're developing and as you're growing your economy, you need to be able to protect it. You've got an amazing, from mom and pop type stores to world-class event venues and destination facilities. Sorry, we're gonna slow brain steak. I feel like that's sympathy for Joe Biden some days. So So, so your community growth needs to reflect that. That needs to be more and more creative, needs to take on regional flavor, more of a regional flavor. You saw the success that the chief and his team had with the support of Anarchist and all of the fire departments. That's the stuff that they're doing to ensure the sustainability of their service model. But it needs to be supported with strength of home. You have a unique building and demographic mix that needs to be reflected in your fire protection decisions, your fire apparatus decisions. And when you look at some of your buildings and the ability of people to do stairs and all of that, there's some really interesting challenges getting people in and out in an emergency. Regional collaboration is important. There are limitations. Oliver's 20 minutes away, or more, depending on staff availability. I don't know what the response times for Anarchist started. That's up for so when you're talking about regional collaboration, you need to recognize there's a significant time lag between triggering that support and its arrival. So the fire department needs to be very capable to do that initial and midstream response. Climate change is gonna challenge you on everything you do, from water availability to fire risk profiles in your community. There will be continuous need to have that conversation on modernizing the fleet and modernizing your approach to how you're going to protect the community against that. And finally, and I think this is a really important one, apparatus is brutally expensive. We were seeing 7.5 to 10% price increase from December of last year to January of this year. There's no indication that fire apparatus is going to become less expensive anytime in the near future. And as we're moving into alternative fuels and electric vehicles and things like that, that's ramping up the cost as well. So a long-term strategic look at what your fleet looks like, what your regional partners are interested in supporting becomes really important. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Polson. That was, it certainly makes sense to us. What you said, I just want to say that the fire that we had last week was, it just shows that our crew was working their magic as usual. And I have to say that the first responders and the other fire departments, I mean, they were there like this, plus all of our town departments who all jumped in and helped. So it really was a community helping the Vesuvius Fire Rescue. So we fully understand the concerns that you brought up, and I think that sort of proved that we need to really support how we can move forward on this. So thank you. I'll just see if anybody has any questions from council.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a question. This was kind of a short version. We have a report from a month previous that's about 20 pages long and kind of in depth. And it mentions that there, if you had this apparatus, it would decrease insurance premiums. Can you expand on that comment?
So Fire Underwriter Survey does an analysis of the risk profile in the community. Part of that risk profile is the relative capability of the fire department in relation to the community's fire risk. So it's specific requirements include aerial apparatus is required for communities that have more than five multi-place buildings over 3 stories and 3 stories or more in height. So each of those elements that you address can have a put downward pressure on the cost of insurance or the availability of fire insurance.
Can I ask you said that we need to upgrade the Fire Underwriter Survey, and I'm thinking that was done, I'm thinking within the last 5 years, and my second part was, how often does it need to be upgraded? Thank you.
To you, Mayor, through to the rest of council, The fire underwriter survey had not been updated since probably the nineties or the eighties. So, taking a proactive approach, we did a fire underwriter survey review in 2023 in advance of this. We were hoping to have those results, back from FUS. We have yet to, get their final determination on what it, may or may not have done. But some of the things that were not being credited was, an additional fire hall, full-time staff, and, the equipment that we had. All of that, plus the systems that we're looking at and putting in place that weren't there before on paper, have all been updated with FUS. So we're hoping that, that will result in insurance savings, across the Solis in the rural area.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just caution council on premium reductions because in over 40 years in insurance, I've never seen, because feuds coming in that insurance rates have went down, like you see it on your savings. So if we're trying to do this and say we're going to save enough money to pay for the fire truck, just be cautious because I could say more, but I'm just saying be cautious.
Thank you. Councillor Chong?
Thank you. I think it was page 8 in the report with recommendations for the aerial apparatus. There was a point, potential legal liability for town if unable to achieve appropriate response to new or existing buildings. What is our risk level currently?
If I may, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Chung, it depends on the ultimate trier of fact. So anybody could allege, either he or she, the judge or magistrate, would then rule about in our case, the size of the building, relative to the equipment that was undertaking fire suppression to be able to mitigate, what was going on in that scenario. So if it was a 5 or 6 story structure and we were trying to hit it with hand lines from the ground comparatively to an aerial, because of the size and complexity of some of these structures that we do have, would it have made a difference? Then that's when we would end up having to get into a position to either confirm our abilities or be exposed that we did not have the abilities for that that type of structure. And when it comes to fire flow, we look at the height, width, length of those sides of the buildings and overall pump capacity. In the report, we've identified properties that are over 4,600 gallons per minute, whereas our fleet right now is represented around half of that, 2,000. So it's the density that we already have that what we're trying to protect, and ultimately it would be in a civil suit that you may have to speak for us and what we actually had on the scene at the time to try to mitigate that fire risk.
Thank you. Did you have something else? Go ahead.
Thank you. Is there like pre-existing case precedent for these type of legal cases?
Through your worship, yes, there's actually a relatively recent Supreme Court decision that found that puts very distinct limits on the policy protections offered to municipal governments, or to any order of government, frankly. If you make the decision to provide fire protection is arguably a discretionary decision of council, right? You can choose to do it or not do it, as the case may be. Once you've made the decision to do it, you have to provide it at some reasonable level, meet reasonable standards, reasonable service standards. The Supreme Court of Canada has upheld that, so that if the municipality knowingly doesn't deliver to an acceptable or reasonable level, that they can be held responsible for it.
Thank you. Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Richard, and for your presentation. I just want to thank you. First off, acknowledging that not just within the surrounding, in the community itself, but in the surrounding area, we're seeing some density increases in uses and events recently starting construction on about 5 stories. I think we're going to see that more now with changes in housing legislation. So obviously, that now is the time of that conversation, the multiple uses of, that fleet change. And appreciate all the super shuttle comments as well. As we know, we do have flow issues in some areas of town. That will certainly help address in the long run. So thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr.
Yeah.
Paulson. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor King.
Thank you, Ben. On an aerial truck, it has the pumping capacity on it, like our other tankers don't have the pressure, like to put out a fire, so to speak. So it's got a bigger pump on it.
Through your worship, it depends on how you order, but yes, it generally, an aerial unit will come with a pump, very small water tank, because you give that up for the ladder. But has a large pump that can deliver large volumes of water through a huge nozzle on the tip. So it allows you to get the water up over the fire room without people putting firefighters in the way.
Okay, thanks. So just address one more question to the fire chief. Wouldn't it be relatively more important to have more apparatus on the east side of the town for overall protection against having a new apparatus?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor King. Right now, our fire hall on 51st Street is a 2-bay garage. So if we wanted to have more than that, council would then have to probably consider either building another fire hall or getting space where we could add some more apparatus to that east bench. Right now, it's got a structural fire engine, which means that it's within its 20 years of certifications. We've had our pumps tested each and every year. So including on the east bench is another brush truck that we have that's over there. So it allows that to work simultaneously as a response with motor vehicle incidents per se. But right now we do have a structural engine over there, and that means that it allows crews that are on that east bench to actually put water on the fire within that first 10 minutes of the call being received, or doing their best to do so, because we do run with paid on call volunteers. Again, it would be nice to have at least a water tender over there, because we do have 2, but they're staged at Hall 1, which is on 74th Ave. It's just about space and the availability of getting those vehicles in a smaller space that the Fire Hall Station 192 on East Bench actually provides.
And just in the comparison, the rough cost for a tender against a ladder truck, what's the difference in cost? Roughly speaking.
Well, a tender, you'd probably be looking at today's dollars from about $450 to $550. And an aerial right now is about $175 to $275.
Thank you.
But yeah, the water tender is not a comparison to an aerial device. An aerial device will allow that elevated master stream to reach somewhere upwards of 75 to 100 feet above the fire, which allows you to actually point it down. A water tender just allows you to shuttle the water back and forth. Takes water where you need it to where you don't have it, and it's repeat until the fire's up. So
Thank you very much. Some interesting questions and responses. So thank you for coming down today. Mr. Paulson, we appreciate your expertise. And thank you, Chief, and our 2 assistant chiefs are also here listening. So thank you very much. Next on our agenda, we have the Associates Best. I'm sorry.
We would like a motion to receive the report as communication.
Oh, absolutely. Councillor Puerto Rico, Councillor King, that we receive the fire apparatus review report for information. All in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you. So next is the Associates Festival Society has a presentation. Thank you, President Ken Baker.
Mayor McCortaugh,
Yes.
councilors. Button here. Thank you. We do it.
Oh, would you like it now? Yes, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
please.
Yeah.
Little music for you, sorry.
Okay. Ready? You have to carry on, Ken.
You have to read that one pretty fast.
Go ahead, can you explain what it was that you just presented, the
Yes,
details? Thank
okay.
you.
Well, because the area on Gyro Park is so busy on Canada Day. And it, to have the firework safety. It eliminates the beer gardens area and a lot of our space, so. I was proposing that we move them directly across the lake on OIB. And I met with Chief Louis and his council. And they're in favor of it. And they're very cooperative in that they would bring their fire truck from Area 27 and have it on site and have a pump in the lake with so they can have sprinklers surrounding the site. The site is approximately 3 acres of sand that's fenced off. And so and also they have, I'm not sure what they call it, but water tanks that you can put on your back. What do they call
I'm trying to think of the appropriate, the pump cans.
it? Yeah, and they have some of those in case there was a spot fire in the sagebrush. So that's just an idea for the fireworks, and it would be an excellent view for everybody in town. And anyway, that's the site. What I'm asking for is $10,000, so we started on fundraising to have a fireworks show that would be somewhat comparable to what we're used to.
I know that this was talked about at the grant committee, and I'm wondering if any of the 3 members of the grant committee would like to ask a question or explain a little bit more. Councillor Chung and Councillor King.
Thank you. We were all in favor of bringing the fireworks back. I know, there are 2 funds that we can draw from, the RMI and Community Services Grant. We have to move a few things around so that, so we can get you as much grant funding as possible. So we're doing everything we can. And I think, I'll have more information on that. Later this morning, tomorrow. Without me, yes. So,
Okay,
stay tuned.
all right, I am very much to.
Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Better. I guess the real question, do you have something in writing from OYB allowing you to be over there than just verbal?
No, I was waiting on confirmation that I could actually put them off. Or have some funding for fireworks.
And who have you kind of talked to about setting off the fireworks?
I met with Chief Louis and his council.
They would set the fireworks off?
Oh, no, to set it off? No, I'm sorry. 2 companies I'm working with right now
Okay.
that are potentials. It's difficult at this late stage in the game to find somebody.
Well, I guess it was also relating to trying to raise some extra money. In the past, they always talk about they raise, I don't know, 30, 40, 50,000 fireworks. So I don't know how you're gonna raise that type of money in such a short time. Like Mr. Trump said, we're all in favor of bringing fireworks back. It's just whether you have enough time to put a substantial show on. Yeah, I mean, it's only across the lake, but it's still a long ways away from sort of being right next to it, watching it, so that's just my little concern.
Well, they have indicated that they can put on a good show. But it won't be nearly as long as the shows we've had in the past. So it will still be a substantial show.
Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Baker, I guess my concern is that you're gonna do it on the city's to be down the line. Our fire department, maybe our fire chief can talk about this a little bit, is the fire safety is basically, we're responsible if there is a fire over there, the fire department. And basically, we still have the boats in the water and all those safety issues we have on this side of the lake. And that's what I was hoping you come today to say how you're gonna, how that's gonna be.
Yeah,
Make sure all those safety features, doesn't matter which side of the lake you're on, you still have that same problem.
no, I'm sorry, I have. And we do have plans to have the area up front of the fireworks patrolled by boats. And to maintain that distance.
And just having heard about it today, I would be very careful about doing something without involving the fire department, because either way, they're going to have to be involved. Also, the RCMP will need to be involved. So I commend you for trying to come up with a solution here. And I know that the committee has looked at this, so we will let them give us more information this afternoon, but thank you for presenting this. It's given us certainly some things to think about.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chief Courtmeyer, go ahead.
Yeah, just for clarity's sake, Mayor, through you to the rest of the council, when it comes to that area, it's actually not identified in their service area. So, and also it being on federal land, we wouldn't have any say. I think the only body that would, have, maybe even some jurisdiction would be the BC Wildfire Service, if they have fire bans on that time, in that period. Because I know that last year there was another group that wanted to do some fireworks during the ban, and that they asked for a permit and it wasn't given. But that's outside of our bailiwick, and we'll provide structural protection for the property on OIB land, but we actually don't look after wildland firefighting there. If a fire did get out of control and it burned to the campground or to Spirit Ridge, that's when we would do either interface protection or structure protection. So yeah, even if there was a fire over there, we wouldn't respond.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Baker, for presenting this to us, and I'm sure there'll be lots more talk about it.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay. Next on our list is the update on short-term rentals program, the project, and so are we having Mr. Garish talk first?
Okay.
I think Mr. Garish is going to talk first,
Online minimal.
and then is this Dan and Brittany? And
Brittany's online, but yeah, I'm Dan from Urban Systems, so
Good.
yeah.
Good. Okay, we'll let Mr. Garish talk first, and then we will have you. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. Garish.
Sure, thank you. So I'll just keep my comments brief, because I know time is tight today. So as council is aware, the vacation rental review is part of the broader review of the town's zoning bylaw. And for a variety of reasons, it's been a while since this issue was last before council. And since that time, as I'm sure councillors are aware, the province has introduced new legislation in relation to short-term rental accommodations. There's also a new legislation introduced in relation to minimum densities in the residential zones. And given all those changes and the time that's elapsed, we thought it'd be an appropriate time to come back to council, reconfirm or possibly seek a new direction on the approach to vacation rentals that was provided previously. And I think there's also a discussion possibly about the provincial opt-in for the principal residence requirement as well, which we might seek some direction from council on. But having said all that, I'll turn it over to Brittany and Dan to run you through the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garish. Okay, thank you. Come forward, Dan, go ahead. And Brittany, and you have one other, Brittany's online, and who, did you bring someone else with you?
Well, this is Georgia. She's another planner with Urban Systems in our Kelowna office.
Welcome.
So, yeah, opportunity to come down and visit Sobeys for the day. So
Good.
So yeah, I think we're going to tackle this presentation a bit of a hybrid style here.
Sure.
I just noticed, and I apologies on our end, in the agenda package, I think there might have been a slide or two omitted from our presentation. So I'm wondering if Brittany can just like screen share on her end and we can go through that way.
So rather than put up the presentation, have Brittany do it?
Yeah, screen share.
Okay, if that works, is that okay? Yeah, great, thank you very much. Go ahead, Ms. Fellow.
Okay, hi everybody. Can you see my screen okay on your end?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. Nice to see everyone again. Feels a little weird to be online and not in person, but we are back to talk about short-term rentals. Thanks for the introduction, Chris. So we'll dive right into our agenda for today. So we're going to give you a recap on what our sort of assignment was here related to short-term rentals in the town. We're going to give you a quick overview of the new legislation that was introduced in the fall since the last time that we were with you in October. And we're going to provide you with a recommendation to consider about how we might move forward with short-term rentals, since there have been some changes since our last conversations about them at the provincial level. And then we're going to outline some next steps for you. Okay, so if you recall, as Chris mentioned as well, our sort of main objective here was to establish a short-term rental program to regulate vacation rentals in residential zones in the town of Osoyoos. And this was the component of the project that was part of the greater zoning bylaw and foreshore and lake zoning bylaw project that we've been working on since early last year. And so here's a timeline of the things that we have done, just as a recap for you, since it has been a little bit. So we kicked off the project at the end of 2022 when we first met with you in December to chat about what we were sort of going to focus on in terms of our deep dive into short-term rentals and what that could look like in the town. We had an extensive community engagement period from February to March 2023, where we did a couple of open houses and had a survey online, and we're seeking input from community members. Then we also did another round of engagement in June, where we had an open house and had quite a few folks show up and share their input on short-term rentals at that time as well. Throughout all of this, we were doing some background research on what other communities are doing in terms of regulating short-term rentals to pull out some ideas of what we could potentially apply in the Osoyoos context, and looking at what other places are doing that could align with some of the direction that we were receiving from the community in terms of how they wanted to see short-term rentals regulated. And if you recall from some of our discussions with you, the community input was quite divisive. We were about 50-50 in terms of support for regulating short-term rentals, and the other 50% in terms of not regulating short-term rentals. And so we chatted with you about that back in the summer in July. And during that time, we brought forth a recommended approach to you and sought your input on how we may adjust that accordingly. Then, if you recall, we came back to you in October because there was some modifications to the scope of this project required, given that your planning department was having a lack of resources there. And so it was requested that we expand the scope of this project to assist with actual drafting of regulations to implement the program. Previously, we were only doing work to provide recommendations to the town on what a program could look like, but the scope was amended in October for Urban Systems to actually draft those regulations to be incorporated into the relevant bylaws. Shortly after our presentation to you in early October, the province made some announcements that there would be new regulations, new legislation coming out about short-term rentals. And so we're going to give you an overview of that today and what that looks like in terms of how this could impact this project. Also in the fall, we facilitated some interviews with other local governments that are similar to Osoyoos in terms of being very tourist focused, and spoke with them about the implementation and enforcement considerations that they had to undertake when they were first implementing their short-term rentals program. So that would help us better understand what some considerations the town may need to make when embarking on the short-term rentals journey. And furthermore, since then, at the end of 2023, last year, as you're likely aware, the province made another announcement about new legislation as it relates to small-scale multi-unit housing, which is commonly referred to Bill 44. And this will have some impacts on what we were previously discussing in terms of our proposed approach for regulating short-term rentals in the town. So there have been a lot of changes that occurred since the last time we met with you, as you can see. So the current approach in Osoyoos in terms of regulating short-term rentals or vacation rentals is that vacation rentals are not permitted in most residential zones of Osoyoos per se, but there are some comprehensive development zones that allow for a mix of vacation rental and residential uses. And based on how the bylaw currently permits temporary accommodations, vacation rentals could fall within a few different types of permitted uses, including hotels, recreational vehicle parks, campgrounds, and resort residences. But these are types of temporary accommodation and not necessarily the type of short-term rentals that we are talking about in terms of having someone stay within your home or within a secondary suite or a carriage home per se. So in the town currently, you have hotels permitted in a number of commercial zones as well as comprehensive development zones. You also permit temporary accommodations through recreational vehicle parks, which are permitted in your recreational vehicle zones as well as your campground zone and your parks and recreation zone. You also permit campgrounds in some of your tourist commercial zones, which are another form of temporary accommodation. And then the key thing here about temporary accommodation in terms of similarity between short-term rentals is resort residences. And so the resort residences are permitted in your commercial residential zone as well as some of your comprehensive development zones as well that allow for both residential uses as well as some forms of commercial uses too. But again, the focus of our assignment was not on looking at these more commercial forms of vacation rentals, but looking at short-term rentals that would be permitted within one's home per se. And so based on our previous direction from you that we sought back in the summer, we talked to you about a number of ways that we might wish to perhaps permit short-term rentals in the town. And so the direction that we received from you was to permit short-term rentals only in zones where single detached residential uses are permitted, as well as permit them only in the home itself, whether that be the secondary suite of a home or in the bedrooms of a home. Or a carriage home that is located on the lot. And the owner of the property would be required to be present at all times for operation, or a designate would need to be present. And so based on the direction that we received from you, the proposed definition that we had for short-term rentals was what we have on the screen here, which is meeting a sleeping unit within a single detached home, a secondary suite, or a carriage home for temporary overnight accommodation for a period of 29 days or less on the property of an owner or operator's principal residence, but does not include a bed and breakfast. And so this definition aligns exactly with the direction that we had received from you back in the summer. And so if we were to move forward with permitting short-term rentals per the previous approach that we discussed, this would have facilitated short-term rentals as an accessory use in the agricultural zone, the single-family residential zone R1, the single-family residential small lot zone R2, and the single-family strata zones RSS. And I have the other criteria outlined here in terms of that I previously outlined in terms of permitting the short-term rentals only in the rooms of a single detached home or a basement or secondary suite or that carriage home. We had also talked about requiring one off-street parking space specifically dedicated to short-term rentals. So this would be in addition to any other parking requirements for the principal use on the property. And we also spoke about capping the number of short-term rentals that would be permitted in the town at any given time to 133. And so this number was based on 5% of the total number of dwelling units in Osoyoos at the time of the 2021 census data. And we had provided you with another option to consider perhaps upping that cap to 10% of the total number of private dwelling units in Osoyoos. But council, you had decided at the time to permit the 5% because this would better acknowledge the division in the community that existed in terms of permitting short-term rentals. At the time when we have presented this option to you, there was approximately 260 short-term rental listings within the town, which was in summer 2023. So 133 would be about half of those short-term rentals perhaps being legalized. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dan here, and he's going to run you through the new legislation and how this is going to impact our project.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
Awesome. So I think, there's probably I might sound like a broken record player here a little bit. I know there's a lot of familiarity with the act here. But by and large, this legislation is designed to free up housing inventory and stock in communities through regulating out short-term rentals that, cause pretty significant impacts to accessible housing or available housing in a lot of communities, not just in BC, but across Canada, North America, the world, really. The kind of the foundations of it, it's really just about giving municipalities the tools and resources to regulate and enforce STR bylaws. So in past presentations and discussions where we've talked about this, one of the kind of considerations that's been brought up is the costs associated. Do we have the capacity to enforce and regulate these? And what the province is doing through this legislation is actually providing a lot of those support. So allowing you to enforce stricter penalties, financial penalties on, illegal STRs. They're creating like a database, taking, the different online short-term rental accommodation providers like Airbnb and Vivo, and kind of collecting that database. So, you have an understanding of where these things are popping up. So they're creating these, again, the ability to regulate it, but also, providing some resources on the identification and enforcement side of things to support local governments or municipalities in BC. So as Brittany was saying, I think she's mentioned it before, these don't apply to RV parks, they don't apply to motels, hotels. This is strictly short-term rentals, under a month, like you'd see on Airbnb. So the new legislation, again, it allows municipalities to enforce requirements for short-term rentals to attain and display a business license for operation. The rental listing platform I was talking about before, they're basically collecting all of the rental listing data and, removing illegal listings at their request. So, if you're regulating that there's no STRs, in your community and some start popping up on Airbnb, like the province can go in and remove those from the website, or they'll be able to do that. I think the big requirement that's getting a lot of discussion is that local governments or municipalities will have the opportunity to require STRs to be located on a property that is the principal resident of the host. So, if I have a home, I want to Airbnb it out, I can do that, maybe a room or basement suite, but I have to be the principal resident, I have to live in the dwelling. And that's really to shift away from, the absentee landlord, STR challenges that we're seeing in other communities. Removing non-conforming use protections, and then just introducing greater provincial oversight through a registry service and a compliance and enforcement unit. So again, trying to bridge that gap where, regulating this stuff is going to take resources. So that's the province stepping in and saying, we can do our part for communities that are that we're going to require to put this legislation on, or for those that choose to opt in. So since Osoyoos is a resort municipality and a population of less than 10,000, you're not obligated to opt into this or be part of this principal residence requirement, but you have the opportunity to choose to opt in. And as a result, kind of gain access to the other supports and resources that the province is implementing through this legislation. So there's obviously a choice here. Choosing to opt in offers greater oversight and control over the rental market. Again, it's giving you that enforcement and support from the province that's, going to be very critical, I think, for a lot of smaller communities. And through this, just gives you better ability to limit STR rental stock just by having those increased requirements, having that greater enforcement, having those resources in place. Obviously, you can choose to forego that opt-in requirement. It may increase investment demand for STR units within the community. It may support, better, catering to fluctuations in tourism or tourists during, different seasons. Based on what Brittany was showing before and sort of the proposed STR approach that had been developed and still going through some conversation, that pretty much aligns with, what you would see with an opt-in requirement. So you're kind of going down that direction anyways. But this is, again, if you want to go to the next slide. Kind of where, there needs to be a consideration. So for municipalities, again, that are under that 10,000, population threshold, to opt into the principal resident requirement, that needs to be done by the 31st through a council resolution. It really just says, we want to opt in, here's some background information, some reasoning for why. And then moving forward as the town goes to create, new infill zoning, that can be flexible uses that permits in the SMOO legislation that's kind of on the way. That'll be an opportunity to further flesh out, how do we want to zone that within our community, specifically in these zones. So, still, work to be done, so to speak. A decision today is not about, these are the rules moving forward. It's just giving you the opportunity, to have resources and have supports as you further finalize and define how you want to regulate STRs in the community. So we have a bit of a process here that just kind of shows this, as I was saying, a decision today or a resolution today on, opting into the principal resident requirement doesn't mean that everything has to be finalized or fleshed out today in terms of how you regulate STRs. But if you do decide to opt in to the principal resident requirement, the next step would be to give notice to the province by the 30th if you choose to opt in. Following that, in the work that Chris has been doing and updating, and that we've been supporting on as well, and updating the zoning bylaw, including the small scale multi-unit compliance, that would be an opportunity to further flesh out exactly how you want regulation to occur here in the town. Again, what we saw before, the proposed approach before more or less lines up with how, you need to enforce it or regulate it moving forward. But there can be, again, more discussion with council and staff on what the best approach is for permitting STRs as a use in the zoning bylaw. And through that, amending the zoning bylaw to have those regulations in place, as well as any other, ripple effect bylaw amendments that are required, like business licensing fees, bylaws, and so forth. And then finally taking those through the approvals process. So, I think a rough timeline, we sort of thought, if you choose to opt in, by the time all of the zoning work is completed and the STR regulations come into effect, probably January 2025, lots of time. It's more just about the immediate decision on your end is if you want to opt into the principal residence requirements or not by the 30th.
And I just add as well too, one thing to consider here, council, is that if you do decide to opt into the program, those regulations will take, the province says that that will take effect on November 1st. But we have indicated January 2025 for you as when your program might actually be implemented in terms of intaking applications for short-term rentals, but we would aim to have your bylaws approved in time for that November 1st effective date.
So on the recommendation side, along with town staff, was just the recommendation that council approves the decision to opt into the principal residence requirement for permitting short-term rentals in the town and pursuing the proposed process for implementation. Just as I went through on the previous slide. Alternatively, you can choose to deny the recommendation to opt in to the principal resident requirement for permitting short-term rentals in the town. So on that note, yeah, just open it back up to the floor if there are any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Dan. It is kind of confusing, actually. Some places are opting in and some aren't. If we decided not to opt in, and we decided to change our mind, at what point could we say, no, we've decided we want to opt in? Can that be done in 6 months, or is there a time limit on that? I just wasn't sure.
I've seen no indication that there'd be sort of like another round or an opportunity to opt in. Like maybe at some point, like if you don't meet the March 30th deadline, the province might come back and give communities an opportunity to re-opt in, but they haven't indicated that.
Okay.
I don't know, Brittany, if you've seen or heard anything otherwise, but I have not.
Yeah, so I think you actually have to, the option to opt in is available every year. It's on an annual basis. So you have to decide if you don't decide this March 31st that you want to opt in, and for those that to come in effect by November 1st, then you'll just continue to be exempt until March 31st of next year. And then you could choose to opt in again at that point in time if you so chose to do.
Thank you, thank you. And we do have to have the zoning bylaws completed by the end of June this year. So that is a must, isn't it? Yeah, okay. I'm gonna see if anybody from council has a question. Go ahead, Councillor Chong.
Thank you. You mentioned that with the FTR Act, it gives us more resources and tools. One of the tools is the ability to enforce bigger fines. How exactly can you specify as to what this tool looks like? Because enforcement is always the issue. It's going to cost the town money to, if the resident doesn't live in Suias or lives in Vancouver, we have to hire someone to serve them, and that's a cost. And then there's legal costs to follow up to actually get the fine. By the time we're done, we may very well be in the negatives. So it costs the town to enforce these STRs. But could you elaborate on what this additional protection or tool may look like for the province?
Yeah, it comes back down to, you know, you're only able to exercise certain fine amounts for like infractions on, you know, municipal bylaws, so to speak. But the new legislation is allowing like a much larger fine to be put in place. I believe, Brittany, was it 50,000?
Yeah, so there's a larger fine, and then the other piece to note too, Councillor Chong, is that there's a provincial registry now. So short-term rentals need to be registered with the province. And if the provincial system finds a short-term rental listing that's not registered, then the province can assist the local government with fining that individual who is violating the rules. So there's another level of oversight now with the new provincial program that didn't exist before. So the province is going to be working with local governments to actually ensure that their bylaws are being complied with, as well as the provincial requirements too. So if you choose to not opt into that per se, then you are sort of losing that ability to have some additional assistance with regulating short-term rentals in the town, because you would be exempt from the principal residence requirement. So it does give you some extra assistance in knowing that the province is also monitoring what is going on for those short-term rentals that are active.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. So basically, the province is giving us a much bigger stick, which is great. Secondary question, on one of the slides of the permanent zones are for STRs or R1, R2, RSS. With Bill 44, we kind of amalgamated them all to essentially RS1. Would that kind of change which zones are now permitted for STRs?
So I see that Chris isn't on the call anymore here, but he's been assisting the town with putting together the new zoning regulations for the SHMU. So this will change how we might actually be permitting short-term rentals in the zoning bylaw, because previously you had indicated that you were just wanting to permit short-term rentals in those particular zones. But now a lot of those zones are no longer going to exist from our understanding of how the town is moving forward with the SHMU implementation. And Chris can speak better to this than I. But this is the reason why we are proposing to wait to incorporate short-term rentals as a permitted use into the zoning bylaw until after June 30th, so that we can decide with you what is the best approach for doing so. Because if you decide that you do want to permit it as an accessory use in your new infill residential zone, whatever that might look like, that will mean that short-term rentals are permitted on all properties that are subject to that infill residential zone, which could be more than those properties that we had identified as having zoning as RS1, RS2, agricultural, etc. per se. We don't know exactly what that looks like right now, and we won't until the draft zone is complete. So that is something that we will need to discuss with council after that June 30th date, is to figure out how do you want to actually go about permitting short-term rentals in the town, and do you want to have them permitted only in certain locations? There could be some other approaches that need to be considered in terms of the where these need to exist, and then that would be reflected in the zoning bylaw accordingly. We just don't have an answer for that at this time, because further discussion with you will be required after that June 30th date.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor Federico.
Thank you, Richard. We're obviously in a unique situation due to the number of temporary accommodations we currently have, the population that we have. And having that 10,000 population, if it's in a position where do we follow the route of our larger municipalities in the region that automatically are opted in by default, versus municipalities such as Oliver, which has a small number of accommodations, but has a pretty larger need for the accommodations. Has there been any indication from, let's say, on the resort municipality side and a smaller population that maybe has a higher number of accommodations as to where they want to go in terms of that opt-in process?
Can I answer that a little bit first? Because I've talked to the resort municipality mayors the other day. Some of them are opting in, some of them are not. I mean, that's their thinking. So it sort of, it seems to be both ways.
Because I know one of the other things we struggle with in this legislation is, and prior to this legislation, is the enforcement side. It certainly does give us some additional tools that no one would have access to. It definitely, as we looked at that early short-term rentals, looking at understanding, the AD implementation time period is incredibly long based on the limitation of what's available in terms of tools that are already existing independently prior to legislation. I appreciate that the province, I think last time Ms. Tuttle was here, I'd asked the question of, has the province given us an update? And of course, it came out like 3 days after the presentation, but I think there's some great benefit for us to take advantage of that additional enforcement opportunity and reporting opportunity that the province is going to provide us on the opt-in process. Of course, the one benefit being that short-term rentals as a whole do currently contribute to MRDT, just as any hotel operator. And that seems to be a growing number, especially in this area. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions? I think we're still sort of mulling this over and trying to figure out what to do next for sure, but we're going to have to make a decision this month. So thank you very much to Brittany and to you for presenting this, and I'm sure you'll hear more. Oh, did you have a question, Mr. Risling?
Well, your worship, I guess we would prefer to have some direction on roughly where we want to go. I guess we almost out of days, so council want to give some action.
I was looking to see if you wanted a motion attached to this, and there wasn't one, and so that's why I assumed that we would. We didn't have to make that decision at the moment, but we could. Councillor Chung.
Thank you. I move that we recommend that we opt in.
And it's been seconded by Councillor Buderica. Or is there anyone else who would like to speak to this, or would either of you like to speak further? Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted clarity. It sounded like you needed a provincial business license, and then you would also need a town business license? Or just a provincial one? In your presentation, you said they had to have a provincial license.
So you register your short-term rental with the provincial system, and then it's up to the local government to decide if a business license is required for operating short-term rentals or not. So based on the direction that we previously received from council in our discussions about how we would be permitting short-term rentals, we are so far proceeding under the assumption that you would still like to have a business license for operating a short-term rental within your home. But if that's something that council would like to revisit or reconsider later on, we can certainly revisit that conversation.
So just clarity, so this goes forward and they get a business license locally, do they have to register provincially?
Correct, Councillor King. You do need to register provincially.
So we could stop them from a business license until they register first?
That would be it could be a detail that you would outline in your business licensing bylaw. So if that's something that you would like to pursue, we could certainly look into that when we start drafting the business licensing bylaw amendments.
Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I guess my confusion is, if we have a lot of people that came here and they purchase apartments and condos, and they rent on the short term to pay for them, and they've got a pretty major investment. And if we opt into this, what happens is those people that bought a condo that was last week said you can buy it and rent it out. Now we're gonna say, no, you can't do that anymore. I'm confused of what's gonna happen to those people and their investments.
I'm just thinking that they do certainly have the option of renting it, just not for one night at a time. Is that not correct? Yes, you certainly could rent it for longer than a month, which many places do. And they will rent to snowbirds or people that come in for a month or 2 months at a time. So that is still the option, I think.
I'm not talking like for the monthly snowbird, I'm talking about the summer they rent for a week. Is it like, I think they said there's, you had to rent it for 30 days, but that's. You should be able to do whatever you want. So I'm confused when it shows up.
There are residential zones in town that do accept weekly rentals, and that's written in there.
But that's only.
Let's speak up.
Yeah.
Sorry, well, I see it there now, but that's the current approach, but if we change the zoning to the SDR, is that going to stay the same? That's what I'm questioning. What's going to happen to those? Those people that invest in those condos with the idea they can rent them out by the week. Now we suddenly just opt into this. Now they're saying, oh,
I agree, it's confusing. Councillor Chong.
Thank you. The whole purpose of this act was to address a dire situation in not just BC, but all of Canada, and that is a housing crisis. So it's It's difficult to find a balance between, of course, having investment in free capitalism and short-term rentals. At the same time, we're looking at generations not being able to afford a primary residence. And then in terms of if we want skilled labor, if we want healthcare practitioners, if we want services, people need somewhere to live. So how are we supposed to house them, but also this vital, basically residential stock is tied up as investments for people who own 3, 4, or multiple residences. So I think what you're speaking to is a much larger issue, and I don't have an answer in any way, shape, or form. But I just want to clarify that there are larger implications to this act, and that is being able to have crucial vital services in Suias. And you need people to live here to do that, and people who live here need to have a roof over their heads.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Rodriguez. Did you have? Oh, sorry, Councillor King. No? Councillor Bennett.
I understand that concern. I guess my biggest concern is that maybe if they put a grandfather clause in or something for people that did that. I don't know. There's gonna be a lot of people that have done that now, and then all of a sudden it's just cut out from underneath them. And maybe going forward, if that was the case, then they wouldn't have bought them. The prices would be the same and the prices go down. I don't know if this is gonna make the price go down when it makes all of a sudden affordable. Because those people that do all those condos. So I don't know enough to feel comfortable going a bit more.
I believe that that there have been some communities that have tried to look at that issue and say, could they be grandfathered in, and it was not allowed. So that's my. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. We have a situation in this town, and that is, we're operating on a zoning bylaw that was written in 1998. In 1998, short-term rentals weren't really a thing. Bed and breakfasts were far and few between, and we had the traditional hotel and campground. Since 1998 and every time since, we've had an enforcement issue because we've had a legislation that has said there is no short-term rentals below 30 days in the town of Suias. This doesn't, that up until now has never been addressed, whether or not. So we're in a situation now where number of these operators have been operating below the radar. Some have been enforced on and dealt with. So their opportunity here was they've always been operating outside of those rules. This doesn't change that one. It still has been operating to the extent of the bylaw that's in place.
Okay, if there's nobody else that needs to speak, we do have a motion on the floor. Could you read it for me, please? Mrs. Robinson or Mrs. Hilson?
That the committee recommend to council to approve the decision to opt in to the principal resident requirement for permitting short-term rentals in the town and pursuing the proposed process for implementation.
Thank you very much. So it's been moved and seconded, and I will call the question. All in favor? Against? Thank you. That's passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your help. All right, the next item on the agenda is staff reports. And we will start off with the community services quarterly report. So that would be Mr. Davis. Go
Thank
ahead,
you, Madam
please.
Mayor. I just wanted to highlight a couple of items for the fourth quarter for 2023 for the Community Services Department. Public skating sessions for all users were significantly higher for this quarter. We administered 256 registrations for fall programs. We organized 4 special events and maxed out with 200 participants for the Snowflake Skate, which took place over 2 days. Our total body fit led the way with over 300 participants in 16 sessions. And the All Hallows Festival and the Christmas Farmers Market lineup were pretty impressive, good special events. With the addition of the new chiller and comparing the power and electrical consumption for the Sunville Arena, from 2022 to 2023. It showed significant savings, especially in gas. And that would be some highlights. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Davis? I guess you're off the hook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Okay, next we have the Corporate Services Quarterly Report, and that will be Mrs. Hilson.
Thank you, Mayor McCordott. I'm gonna just highlight that, bylaw enforcement stats. I'm gonna highlight the year-to-date total from 2023. We had 3,340 number of concerns, and last year's total was 2,264. So, bylaw enforcement has been quite busy. Another stat that I did want to highlight is our Freedom of Information request. Our 2023 fourth quarter was 7. Our total for 2023 was 20. This is up from 2022, which was 10. And our 2021 total, that was the next highest, was 13. I would also like to highlight for first quarter of 2023 that we haven't even finished yet. We are at 9 Freedom of Information requests. So they are taking quite a bit of corporate services time. And I also wanted to highlight some positive news. The following staff were recognized by Mayor and Council for their service and commitment in providing services to our residents in the community. That was Mark Polera, who received his 20 years of service pin, Carl Fichter with 15 years of service, Casey Brower with 15 years of service, Tamara Morgan, 15 years of service, Mike Kotzenuk with 15 years of service, Pablo Sociedad with 5 years, and Tammy Wyking with 5 years. And finally, I'll highlight that our reception saw quite an increase of the number of touch points in 2023 with 2,821 visits in person compared to 1,995 in 2022. So that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hilson. Go ahead, Councillor King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Under animal control, can you tell me what MTI stands for?
That is municipal ticket. So those would be the number of municipal tickets issued for infractions due to animal concerns. Yeah.
And I have another one down, but let's just here. Under park bylaws, you have miscellaneous, like it's gone up 100%. What's a miscellaneous violation?
Miscellaneous would be smoking in the parks, drinking in the.
You got smoking
Yeah.
as a separate item.
Tightrope walking, tightrope, my bylaw enforcement officer is here, so maybe you could highlight.
Miscellaneous would be like a cat call or a call for a noise violation in any event in a strata zone or in the parks. Yeah, so miscellaneous would be a different animal in the parks. We've had goats in the parks. So, yeah.
Okay, just one more question. Under traffic violations, you attend follow-up, it's gone from 17 to 289. What type of violation are you following up on?
So some traffic files, we do need to, so we have the trucks being parked in residential zones.
Right.
So we're just following up on those files, making sure that the residents are not having a repeat violation having occurred again. Or someone's been, we also monitor some of the parks where people have been camping. So we treat that as a traffic file and say, we just follow it up.
Does that kind of tie in for zoning, that delivery of notices, so if people are not abiding by something, you gotta deliver notice by hand?
No, so those are actually compliant with the legislation to hand out zoning, when there's a public hearing. Bylaw enforcement is the ones that hand out those notices, so those would be the touch points. So it's actually providing notice to the residents.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Mrs. Hilson. And we will now ask Mr. Zackel to do the financial services report.
Thank you, Mayor McCordell.
So we've got the stats for the quarterly report for financial services. Just wanted to touch on the surpluses. Our general fund had a surplus of $1,424,555, which was mainly from return on investments. Our fire department had a small surplus of $24,592. The RCMP had a surplus of $193,879. Sewer fund had a surplus of $198,17. And the water fund had a surplus of $294,186. Our Sun Bowl as well had a small surplus of $40,037. At this point in time, I'll pass it back to council for questions.
Thank you very much. Council, anybody have any questions of Mr. Zappo? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Zappo. And we will now ask Chief Gortmeyer to give a report on the Surrey Fire Rescue.
Thank you, Mayor, to the rest of council. You have in front of you, the fourth quarter report from October 1st to December 31st, 2023. I'll pass it back to you, Mayor, for any questions from the council.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about this? I must say that all of the reports are very easy to read and to make sense of, because they all have wonderful colorful graphs in them, and it's easy to find out what you're looking for. So thank you to all of our directors for doing that. Any concerns on the fire rescue? No, other than we know you need an aerial truck. We've heard that. That was loud and clear. We get it.
Mayor, through you to the rest of council, that's not in my fourth quarter report. So
it would be if it was allowed, for sure. Thank you very much. If there's no questions, we will move on to Director Brownstein on the report from Operational Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. You have operational services fourth quarter report. Just wondering if there's any questions from the committee.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question on the water system at the OIB. We do the sewer to the OIB. How does the water system, do they have their own water system?
Council Bennett, the OIB has their own dedicated water system. Yes, we do provide sanitary sewer service to the OIB.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Appreciate the report. And now we're going to ask Mr. Resning to give the planning and development report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things. I just want to thank the team. There's been some vacancies there and some transition, which is caused some process flow issues, but a lot of work's been done to patch some of those things up. And I think they've come around really well and get back to delivering customer service that is maybe more reasonable from a time perspective. So I just want to thank the team for their efforts. And the big things that have been going on from the bigger picture perspective that you heard about today, short-term rentals, zoning bylaw, and Bill 44, which is going to be a significant impact to the municipality's bottom line. It's going to shape the future of the community. We're going to look different in 20 years from now than we do today, for sure. So, open for questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor King.
Just one question. You talked about the Housing Accelerating Fund. Have we had any update whether we can participate in the program?
Through Your Worship, we did find out, actually, I think it was last week, that we were denied funding with regards to the Housing Accelerator Fund. So
I did hear on the news that I think there were something like 500 people that applied for that fund, and they funded 175, I think. So about a third of the people that applied. So unfortunately, we didn't get that.
Yeah, to Your Worship, I think that's it's getting more difficult and tougher all the time to get grants, and that's one of the reasons why I think there's been a shift in what we're trying to do is to prepare plans so that when grants do come available, where we're successful, but you're 100% correct. Municipalities are fighting for every dime. You have to get above that magic line in order to be considered for the grant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ismay. Okay, thank you. And we will move on to the bylaw notice enforcement and dispute adjudication. And that would be our bylaw enforcement officer, Rick Tayal. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, the rest of council. You have a report in front of you, to the committee of the whole, that speaks to the, bylaw dispute adjudication system. You have a brief presentation on this. Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So, so far in, so we've been using, first of all, bylaw likes to educate the public, let them make them aware of what the bylaw is and seek voluntary compliance. Then we would issue a warrant ticket, or currently our enforcement method is a MTI, which is a municipal ticket information. That ticket automatically, if it's disputed, it goes to provincial court. Now, as we've heard previously, that provincial court proceedings can be time consuming and cost a lot of money. So we would like to introduce a secondary enforcement method that a lot of communities neighboring us are currently using. It's called the bylaw adjudication dispute system. It's been used by Oliver, Summerland, Beachland, and this system can be used in conjunction with the MTI system. So MTI wouldn't go anywhere, we would just use the bylaw adjudication along with the MTIs. This has been, the Act, which is the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act, has been in effect. It was a pilot project, I think, in Vancouver in 2003. They tried it for a while, and then a couple of years ago, the Southern Interior Adjudication Act came into place, which we would be a part of. So just to give you a bit of background, the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act, what this does is you have an adjudication system versus the provincial court system. It eliminates the need for a ticket to be served in person, which we heard just before that with the short-term rentals, we spent a lot of money with MTIs actually having to be served on the coast. This will eliminate that because within 7 days of a bylaw notice being mailed, it's considered served. If we leave a bylaw notice on a vehicle or a parking infraction, it is considered served. It also gives the public a better or a more less intimidating method of disputing the ticket, because we would have an in-house screening officer that they could come in and present to and talk to, and actually have the ticket either stayed or dismissed in-house. If they don't like that method, then they can go to an adjudicator, which would just be a more informal court setting. It also eliminates the need to have witnesses formally brought in, and people don't like to do that because they don't like to. A lot of people are very intimidated and also don't want the person that they're accusing have known who is actually accusing. Also, you might not need to hire a legal counsel to go in front of an adjudicator to present your case. So just a few differences between the municipal ticket and information ticket and a bylaw notice ticket. The legal authority for the municipal ticket is the community charter, which sometimes can be pretty intimidating for someone to read through and make a case for themselves. The service requirement, again, like we have heard, is that a municipal ticket has to be served in person. Even if we issue a notice, it does have to be served in person, and it's then you have 14 days from that date to dispute it.
The biggest probably difference between an MTI and a bylaw notice is that the MTI has a maximum fine amount of $1,000 versus the bylaw notice would have a maximum amount of $500. They both have a lower payment option if it's paid within the first 14 days. The dispute screening, right now for the MTIs, it is almost like an unofficial administration choice, whether to dismiss a ticket or to have it go to court. This would formalize, the bylaw notice would formalize that process by having a screening officer. The burden of proof in provincial court is the criminal code versus the bylaw notice would be more of a civil scale of more of a probability scale. The costs for a municipal ticket, none can be set other than the municipal ticket set out by the bylaw. With the bylaw notice, we could opt into enforcing a fee of $25, and it can't be any more than $25 to a person that chooses to go into adjudication court and go through that process. It would just pay off some of our administrative fees. Thank you, Your Worship. If there's any questions.
Thank you. I had one, the screening officer in-house. Does that have to be Mrs. Hilson's gonna answer that. Who would do that?
We would think it would probably be the deputy corporate officer, would probably be the most, common. The deputy corporate officer currently receives the MTIs, and we sit at that office. Currently now, any tickets that are being disputed through MTIs, sit with the, deputy corporate officer and then with director of corporate services, to be reviewed to whether to be dismissed or if they're going to court. That was a delegated authority by council on that, either allows the director of corporate services or the CEO to dismiss. Thank you very much. Councillor King.
Yeah, with that, would you have to update the policy around it?
It would actually, administration would be required to bring a bylaw to council, and then some of the bylaws would probably have to be amended. I think Rick can speak to this. This is more his and Amy's project, but I believe they were going to do a trial run if council was to proceed with this system. I think there was 3 bylaws, and Rick can maybe speak to more which 3 bylaws that they got this would work better for.
Thank you, Your Worship. We were proposing to use the traffic and the irrigation, the watering, and also the animal control bylaw. And if this bylaw notice bylaw works for those 3, then we can look at expanding them to other bylaws.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
just one-
Councillor
Thank you,
King.
Madam Mayor. I guess the adjudication process, is that online or is that public in person?
Thank you, Worship. Councillor King. So the adjudication process, it does happen in person, but there is options to attend through Zoom or also call in.
Councillor Chung.
Thank you. Just looking at appendix B, it seems like we're the only ones left who use MTIs. Let's say Kelowna, Penticton, Vernon, Peachland, Silver, Alberta. So I kind of just want to point that out for clarity. I'm in full support, but.
And you have a recommendation here that you would.
Yes, one thing I did want to clarify,
Yes.
great point, Councillor Chung, is those other municipalities would also still have MTIs, but this would enable bylaw enforcement to choose whether they wanted to write an MTI ticket or a bond ticket in the situation. One of the questions that are great questions that CO had is if they wrote a bond ticket, could they then dismiss it and write an MTI? The answer is no, not for that same infraction. So the next time they could write a bond ticket. So this would come in handy in certain situations. Maybe those out of town residents, maybe we would choose to use a bond rather than the NTI. I did want to note, actually, the fine that we heard again from Mr. Penner in his presentation for an NTI, the actual ticketed amount could be up to $50,000. But currently our bylaws, I think the highest that I've seen is 1,000. That's not common. And that would be something that we would end up relying on legal counsel if we have got to that case.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any other concern? All right, there is a motion suggested here that the committee of the whole recommend to council that administration be directed to bring back a report to the regular open meeting on the bylaw notice enforcement and dispute adjudication system. That's where you said, moving that, thank you. Seconding it, thank you very much. Anything else that we need to talk about on this one? All right, I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. That's everybody. Thank you, Mr. Tyrell. Well done. The next item up is the council procedure bylaw number 1367 from Mrs. Hilson. Thank you, Mrs. Hilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is being provided to council for their information and direction. At the December 12th, 2023 regular meeting, council passed the following resolution. It was moved by Councillor Bennett, seconded by Councillor Chung, that council direct administration to look at changing the council meetings to evenings. So in the report presented in front of you, I had done a little bit of research, and there was 2 previous reports brought to council back in 2010 and 2018 on the same topic. So again, this is up to council. It's your bylaw, the council procedure bylaw. And so we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you. It was interesting to look back at the reports, one in 2010, before any of us were on council, and the one in 2018, where there was the same concerns had been brought up. So I see that we have the pros and cons here. And I'm just wondering if council, anybody has anything that they would like to add to or question of Mrs. Hilson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess it would just be for the public that's actually phoned in or looking at this, if you could kind of read out the pros and cons. I mean, I know we have it in front of us, but there's a lot of people might be watching and don't have this information. So we can just understand it.
Sure. So pros to afternoon meetings. So this would be what was done in the past. I'll just speak to in 2010 when there were evening meetings. The committee of the whole was not used for a committee of the whole. It was used for where the directors would actually come in the morning and present reports to council for information. So then the directors weren't attending those evening meetings, and so they were not available at those meetings to ask questions. So pros to the afternoon meetings currently would be that the directors and staff are available to attend and present their own reports and be available to council without being paid overtime. It also leaves the evening open for council and staff to participate in other activities. There is no rush to complete the committee of the whole or in camera or regular meetings. There's no additional cost to the public. Our meetings are live streamed on YouTube and our channel 18. As well, the meetings are webcasted, so the public can go back and play those at any time. And press deadlines are more attainable. Cons to afternoon meetings is that not all of the public can attend. And those considering running for council who do have day jobs may not be able to attend afternoon meetings and morning meetings, and therefore this could dissuade them from running from office. For evening meetings, the pros would be that more public may be able to attend if they wish. And again, it may encourage those working during the day to run for council. Cons would be additional costs and wages. Meetings may not be completed due to time constraints. There could be the inability for staff to attend to answer questions. It can make longer days for both council and staff. And other evening events that or meetings that council regularly attend may not be able to be attended to as they intended to be.
Thank you. There's also quite a long chart here, because I know Mrs. Hilton has contacted several other communities to find out how they run their meetings, when their meetings are, how often they are. So it's quite varied there. When I was looking at this, I wondered, I totally understand why meetings are held in the afternoon and in the morning. Actually, any other committee that council may be on, library committee, regional district, those are all during the day. So you cannot just say, well, we'll only meet in the evenings, because that, depending on what you're involved in, it could be at any time of the day or night. I wondered if, and I know some of the communities have tried this, of having, we have 2 meetings a month, or 2 full days a month where we have meetings. Some have chosen to only have 1 meeting a month. Some people have chosen to have meetings every 3 weeks rather than every 2 weeks. There's also the possibility of moving, I would think, the committee of the whole meeting and the regular meeting in the afternoons or evenings and not in the morning. That is also, I think, something we could look at. And I'm wondering if, for the sake of compromise, if you did have 2 meetings a month, if you would have 1 in the morning or 1 during the day and the second one in the evening. And I don't know how confusing that would be, but it's a possibility. And my last question is, if we have already set out the meetings for the year 2024, we know when they have all been scheduled and the times that they've been scheduled. Is it possible, if we chose, to adjust those this year, or would we have to wait till 2025? Thank you, Mrs. Hilton.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to remember. So again, this is totally up to council. So council chose to have 1 meeting once a month, 1 meeting every 3 weeks, or having 1 morning, or like 1 currently, how we do it with meetings in the morning and then at 2, and then the next council meeting in the evenings. I think actually that was the way the town of Oliver did in the past, but I think they have moved to just 1 meeting a month. So again, that would be something that if the council so chose, that could be the direction to give. And it would just be an amendment to the council procedure bylaw. Again, if we are amending the council procedure bylaw, we are required to give statutory notice. So that is publishing twice in the Times Chronicle. And then, so that would be no different than the council meeting schedule. So council did decide to do this in September, let's just say, I think that's what they did back in 2010. It would have just required 2 notices in the Times Chronicle, and another part of that is posting on our public notice board, which is at town hall. So those statutory obligations.
Thank you very much. So today, this is just for information. We are not making any kind of a decision, but I certainly do appreciate providing all this information. And I'll just check to see if anybody has any questions or suggestions or concern. Go ahead.
I guess we were hoping to get some direction from council on moving, whether what they wanted to do as it did come to administration from the regular weekends.
Okay, Councilor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that report is really good. It shows all additional costs of $40,000-$50,000 a year or more by having the evening to pay for staff to connect. But I also think about all the people that are here presenting today that came. They come from Kamloops, they come from Vancouver, they come to do presentations. But they're going to have to come and not just be here in the day, but extra days for them because they're going to have to stay over in the evenings. We also got people that come here that want to come here with the land stuff, so they bring their not their cows, but their planners and stuff with them. So I think there's a lot more benefit to have in the afternoon. And I think that I go to school board meetings, and you go to school board meetings, you don't really get anything out of them because they meet all day, then they put their reports together, and because the evening's so short, the reports are just, oh, we had a meeting today and that's it. So unless you have that copy of the report, the reading of the meeting is just kind of yes, we do, we're past, and that's it. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councilor Chung.
Thank you. I think there could be a compromise. What I didn't like from previous was there was clear inefficiency when you have evening meetings and then the community of the whole becomes essentially not a waste of time, but it's just redundant. I don't like the inefficiencies. But perhaps we can shift community of the whole to 2 to 5 and then regular open from 5 to 7. This allows us, or it allows the working public to attend regular open meetings, because it is after work. That's just opening up the floor for discussion. Perhaps that will be a reasonable compromise. It wouldn't maybe create too much overtime. Just and discuss.
And keeping 2 meetings a month, are you, that comes in that way? Okay. Anybody else have any suggestions? Councillor Puerto Rico.
Sorry.
First, he's going.
Okay. Basically, I think to point out here too, and I appreciate it, is that the initial report here 2010, Channel 18 was the only option to do council meetings. That has changed. Obviously, there's electronic functions now that allow us to do so. But prior to that, Channel 18 is you can only watch council meetings if you were watching either live at 7 p.m. on cable, if you were a cable user, or a rerun. And we're in a situation now, as times have changed, there's digital ways of options of viewing it, you know, the packages are easily accessible. I'm not sure if the costs involved, I mean, you know, as much as, you know, that's 65,000, I believe, a year roughly increase in terms of staff time. That's 2%, that's a 2% tax increase. And I don't think that's the appetite right now in the community for us to add those additional funds over and above, just for a change in meeting times.
Thank you for your input. So anybody else want to? Some input on this? Is there anybody who would like to make a motion to move this forward? Councillor Chung?
I'll make a motion to keep meetings twice a month. Move the committee of the whole to 2 to 5 and then regular open up from 7. As a recommendation to be brought forward to council.
Thank you. What we do need a seconder for that motion in order to move it forward. We don't have a seconder, so the motion will not move forward. Is there someone who would like to make a different motion? Councillor Waterika.
Thank you, Worship. I knew that we received this report of information and that we continue council meetings in its current form.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Bennett. Any discussion on this? I guess the only thing that I'm looking at here is I think it might be easier for Councillor King, Councillor Bennett and me to make meetings at various times. My concern is Councillor Chung and Councillor Puerto Rico, who both have full-time jobs that they need to address in this, and we seem to have 2 different points of view on it, which is perfectly all right, but I'm just wondering how we could always bring this back. It's the thought, it was asked about, we could continue to think about it, but at the moment, we do have a motion on the floor that we keep meetings for 2024 at the present schedule. So I will ask for anyone, I'll ask for a vote on this motion. All in favor of that motion? Against? Thank you. So that is passed and we will leave it the way it is at the moment. Thank you. I will ask for, and Councillor King, have you already terminated the meeting? Thank you. Councillor Chong is seconding that. All in favor. Thank you, everyone.